global elite were expecting to experience this Brexit phenomena. I think they underestimated the angst that existed in the population, and whether or not it was something they wanted or whatever, as a crisis, it's still something that gives them an opportunity to manage it. Even if they didn't want it in the first place, it still turned into a crisis, and now they have an opportunity to manage the crisis and do some damage control. I think there's some evidence of damage control within the European Union itself. Trying to jockey for position, trying to create a super state with it while they still have time within what's left of Europe now. England would not be included in that super state, by the way. But things are realigning in Europe right now, and other countries are expected to take their own exit out of the EU. There's just a lot of populist angst. I don't know any other word to use. It's just they're grinding their teeth over there over all these regulations that are just crushing them, and they don't really understand how they got there, and they don't really. I don't think they really understand what's going on, but they know that they have pain because they can't move left, right, up, down, whatever. Every time they turn around,
right.
It's like, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't do this. No, you can't go there. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not a steer in a feedlot. I'm a person down here.
Sure, absolutely, no question about it. It's interesting to me that, because we've talked for a long time about how the globalists, the global operationists have, certainly had in mind a means by which they were going to accomplish, a one world order and taking over the world, so to speak. And the European Union, I thought, was a pretty big piece of that puzzle, was it not?
It is. But here's, in the larger picture, here's what I see happening right now. The monetary systems of the world are on the verge of collapse.
Okay.
They've burned it out. They've extracted all of the money that they can from the economic system as it stands today. The Federal Reserve, for instance, when it started in 1913, has now caused a depreciation of our currency that's about 99%. So what's left? They've burned it out. They've taken everything out of it they can, and every central bank in the world is technically bankrupt today. They're loaded up with bad assets that probably will never be sold. And I think the central bankers and the large bankers know that the end of the financial system is at hand, and the economic system as we have known it for the past hundreds of years. What we see on the horizon, however, is this whole system of sustainable development. And
right.
The United Nations is bent on applying sustainable development as an economic system throughout the world. It would appear, in order to do that capitalism has to get out of the way completely. And there's a moral hazard to, at this point, to dump on capitalism for the sake of implementing sustainable development. I see this going on in Europe in many different ways. For instance, the Islamic invasion has come up from the south. This
right.
is all a policy of the same global elite that are running the European Union. Go figure that one out. They say that a multicultural society is a necessary thing in order to implement sustainable development. Well, in the process of creating a multicultural society, they're also ripping Europe apart. It kind of reminds you of a little bit of the 10 toes on Nebuchadnezzar's statue, that the vision that Daniel interpreted for King Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament. The statue depicted toes that were a mixture of iron and clay. It's just, well, iron and clay doesn't stick very well together.
Right.
But this kind of fracture is taking place in Europe right now, and it is hard to get a handle on. But the people themselves, I have to say, at this point, the people themselves are feeling the pain, even if they don't understand the cause of their pain.
Well, I think that's an interesting observation, because I would have to say I think you're right. I think that they are all feeling the pain, so to speak. Now, there's some excitement from what I've seen and the people that I've talked to in England, specifically with regards to the opportunity to break up this European monopoly.
Well, they would like to do that, I think. But at this point, since England has chosen to go its own way, it's basically going to be England against everybody else. They're big enough to do that. They also have, like the Bank of England is the oldest central bank and the oldest bank in the world. It's over 600 years old. They have a lot of history in England. It's still a very powerful nation in the world. And whether they have any further impact on the European Union or not, the rest of the world should pay attention when for the rise of England, if you will, that's going to come. And I really think it will. I think England has enough, still has enough staying power that it'll be very influential in the world in its own right. And unfortunately for the EU, they are very uncompetitive right now. They're so wrapped up in regulations and stuff. They're very uncompetitive. And with England on the loose, in a sense, not being restricted by all those regulations, they have an opportunity to really whoop the daylights out of the EU economically. And I think they know that.
So is this a setback for the globalists?
Well, that's a $64 question. You can read it two ways. One is you can read it as the rise of populism around the world, like we have Trumpism in America today. It's clearly the same psychology going on here that we see over there. Will it result in a significant setback? We have to wait and see. The thing that bothers me is that amidst the uprising, people don't really understand the cause of the whole thing in the first place. They don't understand the nature of technocracy. They don't understand or give credence to the nature of the United Nations. And all these people are working against them at this point, but they don't see this enemy. They see the pain, but they don't see the enemy. Now, in a war, you have to actually locate, discover, identify, and then destroy the enemy. That's part and parcel of war. And we're in an economic war right now. We're in a political war right now. Fortunately, it's not quite a shooting war, but, with everything else going on, that could happen too, I suppose. But people need to understand the cause of this so that they can correct the system that they're trying to, revitalize right now. And I fear if they don't understand the causes, that they will fall victim to the crisis managers amongst the global elite.
Well, I'm glad that you bring up the issue of the uprisings and the potential anarchy and things of that nature, because quite frankly, Patrick, I'm of the opinion that what we're seeing with the BLM and with these kinds of organizations is in fact very much being facilitated by the globalists who kind of want to take our eyes off the ball, if you will, and get us distracted. But by the same token, they want us in a state of chaos and upheaval. You think about the connections of a guy like George Soros, who has been connected with the funding of BLM and these rioters. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a good point. If you take George Soros, he's not a member of the Trilateral Commission, by the way, but if you take people like George Soros, wrap them into groups like the Trilateral Commission, and like the core of the European Union. People like Peter Sutherland, who originally helped set the policies in Europe for immigration from the South. What these people are doing collectively, and it is to destabilize society in general, to destabilize society. All of the riots, the shootings, the terrorist attacks in Europe, the terrorist attacks here, the mass immigration that we have right now from Middle East countries, where certainly there are just scores of jihadis coming into America. There's no doubt about it. We've already felt the impact of that here. There's an attempt to destabilize society altogether. George Soros is at the front of this. You know, you wonder what on earth could be in this guy's mind. Well, if you look at the Peter Sutherlands of the world, the George Soroses of the world, the open border situation in America, the open border situation in Europe, none of the people want that over there. They don't want to throw their whole society, their whole history away to these people. They're destabilizing Western society, and you have to ask, well, why would they want to do that? Again, all I can think of is the economic disruption of capitalism and free enterprise, which very well could end in total collapse. Out of the ashes, the phoenix of technocracy might rise. That's about the only explanation that I can give to it at this point, Greg. And it's not a happy one, I have to say. But these people, to our way of thinking, are absolutely insane in what they're doing. To their way of thinking, though, I guarantee you they're not insane. They think they have an agenda, and they think they're playing it out very well. I'm convinced of that. They're not insane in the sense of being like criminally insane or something. They're just doing something that it's not our agenda. That's all. It's not what we want, know, and have experienced for the 250 years in this country. They want to do something altogether different.
Well, but honestly, that's at the root of all of this, is that they have a different ideology. They have a different plan for how they want the world to run. And it goes back to some of the things that you write in your book, Technocracy Rising, where they elevate man above God, they eliminate God, they take him out of the picture, and it's kind of the Tower of Babel mentality, isn't it?
Well, it seems to be on the United Nations level scale. Absolutely, the nations of the world are bonding together, really, to create this new economic world order called sustainable development, which, as you know, I call technocracy because that's what it is. It originated in the 1930s. Right. But the world is rushing to the United Nations movement to follow on with this and to start doing all these things in their respective countries that will implement sustainable development completely. It's not completely implemented yet, but they're working on it. But what I realize nobody in America really understands what the United Nations is attempting to do. But the head of climate change at the UN just resigned. I think she's going to be the next Secretary General of the United Nations. Her name is Christiana Figueres. She's a smooth operator completely. She's articulate. People love her. She's a negotiator. She's just has a way of completely disarming people to get them to do what she wants. And she said last year in a press conference, she said, this is the first time in the history of mankind that we're setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution. This lady has declared war on the West, actually just on the world, because the whole economic system of the entire world is related in one way or another to free enterprise and capitalism.